Welcome to week 12 of the course. We've got obviously 3 weeks to go, and then finals week, and then graduation. And quite a few of you, I think, will be graduating in May, and then that's going to be exciting. And then get on to the next chapter of your life. In the meantime, though, the course continues, and we're in a new week, a new block of instructions. It's called the global context. And I want to offer something by way of a personal introduction to it. To begin with, just as a housekeeping detail, we're going to be basing the remainder of the course almost entirely on Wayne Lee's textbook, Waging War. And I've been looking it over, and the textbook is so straightforward in the way in which it is organized and written, and it's so clear that I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through it. It's just so easy to read and understand that I don't think I would know the point of it. But what you're going to see as you read the assigned chapters is you're going to see that the mostly European developments that we've talked about so far in the course, intersect in interesting kinds of ways with developments in the rest of the world. And it's that intersection that I'm interested in your catching on to. It's what Wayne Lee, the author of the textbook, was chiefly trying to do. And from time to time, I will sort of interject myself to help you along with the textbook. But generally speaking, I'll provide you with a study guide or something along those kinds of lines as and when I can. But you should be able to handle this particular book anyway on your own, and that will free me to do a little bit more in the way of sort of value added instruction to give you something beyond the book. And yet, I have a certain modesty, I guess, as I think about dealing with the global context for reasons that let me just explain with by putting up a short video presentation. Okay. That's me in the middle. I'm 25 years old. Back then, I was a graduate student at King's College London, who would come down during the summer of 1985 to visit with a friend of mine, and she'll be showing up in a photograph a little bit from now. But the photograph is taken in Mombasa, a port city in Kenya, and those two guys were selling goods on one of the streets, and we had a good time sort of haggling over this, that, and the other. And it was just, it was a pleasure. And it was unhurried and, leisurely and done in the spirit of fun. And we kind of got to get to know each other a little bit. And I understood the entire time that was part of, their salesmanship was to make it a kind of, an experience. I mean, after all, they were dealing with tourists. And so, they gave the tourists, an interesting, fun time. At the same time, though, even though it was driven by their business interests, that didn't mean it wasn't sincere, and that didn't mean it wasn't genuinely meaningful, and so forth. And I had a nice time with them. I've still got some of the items that I bought, from them. So. Well, you may have heard the name Mombasa before, and this is why. That is Fort Jesus, or Fort Jesus, if you want to go with the original Portuguese pronunciation. That is the fort, the artillery fortress, the Tres Italienne design that the Portuguese constructed at the end of the 16th century to protect Mombasa, which was then under the control of the Portuguese and was an important linchpin of their maritime empire in the Indian Ocean. And this begins to get at where I have this sort of sense of modesty about myself, where it comes to really expanding out into genuine global military history or world military history. Because I was trained as an American military historian and as a European military historian. And of course, like most Americans, to the extent that we learn history, we learn about American history and secondarily about European history. We don't learn very much about the rest of the world. And even in terms of today, we don't know very much about much of the rest of the world unless something, really dramatic intrudes. And even then, our understanding of parts of the world where, millions and even hundreds of millions, even billions of people live, we're completely ignorant of almost everything about their lives and their society and everything. And that includes me. As I'm a pretty good historian of the American military experience and the European military experience, but I'm much more humble when it comes to the global military experience. Fortunately for you who may want to take some more war in world history stuff, we have just hired a faculty member whose specialization is going to be global military history. So somebody who's really competent to do something I'm just kind of, sort of not quite faking, but doing the best that I can. And I recall that when I created a course called The History of War back in 2003, I positioned the course as one in world military history because I was hoping that eventually someone would come along who could actually teach it in global perspective. And so I wanted the course description and the design and the approval to be for a war in world history course. And it had to be presented to members in the committee to get an okay. And I tried to be realistic about what I could do, what I was competent to do in the way of world military history. So I included topics with which I was familiar. And a world historian, her name was Marilyn Waldman. She was in our department. She was actually quite prominent in developing the field of world history, which was new at the time. She was scathing in her assessment of the syllabus, and she's like, "Yeah, I thought we'd gotten farther than this, and this was really primitive of me, and so forth." And and she didn't understand, as other colleagues did, that Mark was trained as a Europeanist. Mark was trained as an Americanist. But Mark is trying to create a course that really will be, a course that Marilyn Waldman one of these days would like. It's not the kind of thing got through Marilyn Waldman. Tremendous scholar she was, people person, maybe not so much. But I think about Marilyn and that encounter with her, as I'm thinking about the next 2 weeks, actually the balance of the course. This is all going to be dealing with the global context of military history. Okay, Mombasa, Kenya, where is it? Let's take a look at the map. If you can see the cursor, and I'm hoping that you can. I think I think I could do the laser pointer thing. I can. Terrific. All right. This is Kenya. You can see that it's British, and that's because in the 19th century, Kenya was a British colony. And if you look, the entirety of Africa, with one exception, Ethiopia, the rest of Africa was in the hands of Europeans. What would become 53 countries on a giant continent was all in the hands of Europeans. Hundreds of millions of human beings had no control over their own destinies. They were colonized by people from a different continent. And so that's where Mombasa is. But I was in Mombasa as a tourist having flown into Nairobi, which is about here, some weeks before, as coming from London and landing there on my way to a place called Nundu, located right about here in what you're looking at is called the Belgian Congo, because as you can see, it's controlled by Belgium, would later become known as the Congo, then would become known as Zaire, which is what it was called when I was there in 1985, and then now is the Democratic Republic of Congo again. And this is where I spent the bulk of my time. What I was doing there was this does not want to work when it's a laser pointer. There we go. Okay. I was there to visit and to help a friend of mine, Kathy Morrison. She was in Nundu, which is a village in the very eastern part of Zaire, right on Lake Tanganyika, which separates Zaire from Tanzania. She was there to do a year of volunteer work on a medical mission centered in this village of Nundu. And this medical mission was provided the only medical care, advanced medical care for 500,000 people. It was the only access to medical care that they had. And people would come from, 30, 40 miles away sometimes to get to this medical mission for help when they needed it, when they needed surgery, or when they were, just any kind of serious malady. They were coming to this medical mission. And so the work that Kathy was doing was very, very important. And she and I were good friends in Ohio, and she left to go to work on this medical mission at about the same time that I went to London to get my master's degree. And we were in a park just outside of Westerville, and we were sitting on a picnic table, and I was saying, if I get a chance, while I'm in London, I'll come down and see you in Nundu. And I didn't realize that that the distance between London and Nundu was greater by far than the distance between Columbus, Ohio, and London. So this gives you an idea of just how poorly Americans, even supposedly educated Americans like myself, actually have a sense of the world, the wider world beyond America and Europe. Then our understanding gets to be pretty sketchy. Yep, there's Kathy Morrison. She passed away. I'm sorry. She had ovarian cancer and died quite suddenly about 13, 14 years ago. And I still miss her. Okay. I'm trying to get rid of this thing so I can get back to advancing stuff. Okay. That is me on the road. And there was a road that bisected part of the medical mission. On one side was the part of the medical mission where the doctors, the nurses, and so forth actually lived. And they didn't live in huts or anything like that. They lived in American style housing because their job was not to, their job was to take care of people medically. So they needed to live in conditions that were going to keep them as healthy as possible. So on one side you had, if you'd look, you would have seen American style housing. And on the other side, you would have seen the hospital itself. And there I am, right in the middle of that road. And that road, by the way, is the Cape to Cairo Highway. Once upon a time, that was a paved road. And why wasn't it paved anymore? War. In the 1960s in particular, a series of wars connected with the independence of the Congo from Belgium racked this whole area. And of course, there was the government that resulted was far too poor to maintain roads. And I tell you what, if you don't maintain a road, it goes away really fast. So you would never have known that was a highway. Okay. And here again, there I am in Nundu working on a medical mission, and my ignorance of that very region was profound. I knew something about where I was going, but one of the things I didn't know was that there was guerrilla activity in the area, not too far away. Oh, sorry, this is not helping me out here. Okay, there we go. Yeah. I'm going to show you this one slide, and then I'm going to stop and give you a break. Tell you a story about this one. This is, you're looking at a drama. 3 actors in a drama. The woman is Kathy Haddock. She was the wife of the doctor, the main physician at the Nundu hospital. Sweet lady, just really, really nice person. And the second character in this drama I'm about to tell you about is this man. I don't know his name or anything about him except that he owned that particular goat. And the thing about the goats in the Nundu area is you didn't have any banks or anything along those kinds of lines. So anytime you got money, what you would do is you would buy a goat, and you'd keep that goat and then you sell it to somebody else. And so that was actually a significant part of how the financial system of the region operated. Things can be very different in other parts of the world. So that goat represents a significant amount of that man's wealth. Okay, the third character in this particular drama is the goat himself. And let me tell you about this little drama with the goat, and I'm going to cut you loose, take a little break. In that part of Africa, the habit after you've washed clothing is to lay it out on the ground flat to dry. And what happened was that on the hospital grounds, mothers of newborn children, or their mothers-in-law or whoever was there to help them out would wash the swaddling clothing of newborn children, and then lay it out flat on the grass outside the hospital to dry. Doesn't sound like any kind of problem, does it? The problem was that people like the man in the photograph kept letting their goats run loose. And these goats would find their way onto the hospital property and would do their business, defecate on the ground. And those swaddling clothes would be washed and laid out on that ground to dry, and then would be placed on, you'd swaddle that newborn baby with it. And of course, newborn babies, as you may know, their umbilical cord has been cut, but it hasn't fallen off yet. And so it is a highway for any kind of infection. And what happened on a regular basis is that a newborn child would get umbilical tetanus. And I saw that. I saw that myself one day. I was in the hospital ward, and there was this little baby, newborn, not even a week old, in a cradle, shaking to death like a poisoned mouse. Nothing that could be done. And the hospital staff would explain, the African nurses, the Zairwa nurses who worked there, the Zairwa medical staff, and in other respects too, and the medical mission staff themselves, Kathy Haddock, her husband, and so forth, would try to explain over and over again: do not dry your clothes on the ground, number one, and two, fellas like this guy that owns a goat, do not let your goats come onto hospital property. And they would try to explain it kills babies. You're killing babies when you do this, when you bring the goat onto the hospital property and or you put, swaddling clothes to dry on hospital property, you're going to kill a baby. And that sweet, lady in the background, Kathy Haddock, wouldn't hurt a fly. One time a goat came on the hospital property and it was just a bridge too far for her. She took that goat, put a rope around its neck and hanged it. Just hanged it from a tree. Killed it stone cold dead to make a point. And I tell you, that's for her to do something like that. Believe me, as nice and gentle a lady as she was, that took quite something. But all of this that I'm telling you about, going into this part of the world, all of it completely new to me, and all of it just at the tip of the iceberg of what these societies were really all about, what was really going on with them. And part of what was going on with them was that they had their own military history too, just like any other part of the world. And as a military historian, I should have known something about it. I should certainly know something about it now. I'm a little bit better off now than I was when I was 25 years old, but still, long ways to go. Stop here. I'll tell you more on the other side. There we go.